Hello and welcome. This is going to be a tutorial that somebody asked for that helps sort of explain how you can make the 2D textures for the nameplates on decals, but they give the 3D appearance with shading and everything. So a couple of things you need. First of all, and this should be in my recent palette here, is a good quality source image such as that, and then a good quality texture, and this one was freely downloadable. Can't remember the website, but if you do search for freeware and brush metal textures, things like that, this is what you get. So we'll move on to this one, and with our rectangle selection selected, we'll bring down a box that just basically pops us down to what we're working with. And now we'll start with the outer edge of the font and work our way in. So how I'm going to do this, if you press and hold here, you'll see you've got a selection tools, and I'll be using the rounded rectangle tool. Now because we're on quite a size of font image, it's nearly 3000 pixels wide, so you'll need a good amount of rounding, something say like 35 pixels. So we will get that. Start at what is the top left corner of where that would go. While your left click is held down, pull it to the bottom right corner, more or less, and then let go. There we are, we have a rounded rectangle. Now, because it's the same colour as the background, just change it and it just shows up nicely. So click off that layer, the layers palette, choose another colour, so I'll do blue, and then hide that one. Do the same for the inside, but what we want to do is we want to drop the rounding pixels down to about 30, maybe 29. Come to the top left corner again, and do exactly the same. Rough down there because you can always change them afterwards. There we are. Now we will reload our red, and well, blimey, that was pretty much dead centre. We will just tweak the position slightly, and well, yeah, I'm happy with that. Not bad. One shot, one kill. So with that done, now what we can do is come to here, get a good width size selection similar to Nameplate, Control and C to copy that, come into your main image, Control and V, drop that down, just pop it between the rounded rectangles and the background. So there we are. What I need to do now, so click on the rectangle and then holding shift click on the second one, go to layer, start rasterize, and rasterize the layers. This turns it into pixels, which means they can be used as sort of selectable shapes. So the red one's a bigger one, so click the red layer, select, load selection, then the transparency, and it will be a new selection. So that gives us our marching ants. Now we move to the blue rectangle, number 2, select, load selection, transparency again, but this time we want to subtract it so that we get the difference between the two, which we've now got there. Now that's the bit we want to have, and we want the rest to go, so we'll do an inverse of that selection, click on our metal layer, press delete, and then once you hide the two rounded rectangles and the background, you'll see that we've got a nice brushed aluminium texture there. What I do now, if that's the right size, get your rounded rectangles layers, we don't need them anymore. Pop the background on, and what we're going to do is create a new layer, okay, like that, and we will fill it with a rough colour from the back of the nameplate, like that. And last but not least, obviously, we want to put our nameplate above the top. If you double click on the layer, this will bring up the layer style, tick drop shadow, come to there. Now you need a good opacity, something like about 80. Now I'm going to have an angle of sunlight coming from the top left, so you want to have something like 145 degrees, and then playing around with distance and the spread and things like that just affects what shadow you got. If you use size, it makes it sort of, spreads a bit differently, so I like to keep the size low, so it's sort of a nice sharp shadow. So just tweak those values to what you're happy with, and then press OK. There we are, first bit of shading done. next up we need to move on to the text. So hit your text tab. Now if you want to search on Google, which is what I did, the two fonts that you need are called British Rail Dark Normal Regular and British Rail Light Normal Regular, and you can find these on modelers forums and things. They got links to them. Download the fonts, put them inside your Windows /fonts directory, and then they're able to be used. And the British Rail Dark Normal Regular is the one that you sort of see for the nameplates. So got that set to black, doesn't matter because we won't be using the colour. Hide layer 2 where we got our brown obviously, and then come to somewhere near the centre and click, and then just type out obviously Northern Princess. Now as you can see, it's quite well spaced because of previous tweaking I've done. If you press Ctrl and A, you'll select all the text, and then come up to this paragraph tool, character and paragraph menu, click that, and then we've got controls for the character. So you can see this value here, the VA, which just controls your horizontal spacing, set to 60. So I'll drop that down to we'll say 5, and that gives us much more what we're after. And then you can just tweak the size until it's taken up more or less the same space as the image you can see underneath. So that's that all done. The only issue you can see, if I confirm that, is that the R and the T fairly close together, a bit closer than I'd like. So with your text tool still selected, come in by the R, select the R, and then come up to this VA number, and you can actually just change the spacing, and that will only affect the spacing between the R and the T. If you look, if we go extreme, all the way to there, every other letter is the same spacing apart but those. So we want something like, let's have a look. You can also use your middle mouse button. I'd say something like 45 looks good. So okay, tick that. And then if you select your move tool, you can use your keys or your mouse and just sort of position it where we think it should be going. So that looks good to me. You got some variation with the font size and stuff like that, but that can come about from the angle the photo's taken at, things like that. And as long as you get a good approximation, no one's going to shoot you. What we now need to do for this is obviously get double click again, and we get a drop shadow, and it remembers the angle that we used, which is helpful. Set the opacity up again, 80. Distance, we used 13 before, but obviously the font is excuse me, it's a lot shorter in height than the full width of the plate, so we'll only have something like about 6. Give it a spread of 50, and then yep, that's it. Hit OK. Good. Now you notice that with that selected, it's pretty hard to see. If you bring your back plate back up, but what we are going to do here, we're interested in the shadow from here. Obviously we want the text to appear as metal. So what you do, while on your text layer, go to the fill here, click on your down arrow, move that right down to 0%, and all we're left with is the shadow, which is good. Now with this, it's always good to check whether you've got the font in more or less a central position. You can sort of tweak it based on where you've got it. As you can see, it's banding around when I use the mouse because I've got the snap enabled, which is another reason you can use keyboard, because the snap, it doesn't affect the keyboard, only the mouse. So we think we've got a good central position, so that's good. So now on to how to get the font in the brush metal texture. Now that should still be in clipboard from when we pasted it for the outside, so just hit Ctrl and V again. Phew, it was still in our clipboard, and we will drop that down to below the outside of the plate just for neatness. And what we'll do is then select the text layer, go to selection, load selection again. Now all we've got is the font at the moment, but we are interested in the bits of the metal we're deleting. So again, select the inverse, which I think you can actually do. Let's just go to load selection. Yeah, see, you could tick invert here, and then you get that without doing select inverse. Press your delete key, and then you forget that you haven't gone back to the brush metal layer. Go to the brush metal layer again that we just pasted, hit the delete key, and there we are. So now we have the background of the plate. We have the text of the plate with a little shadow, and then the border of the plate with a much more prominent shadow. At this stage you can look at adding in things like rivets and other detail, maybe some brush strokes, something I've not done, but one other extra little piece of detail which I do like to do is if you go to, so layer 1 and layer 3 are our metal textures. So if you go to layer 1 and then do new layer, and we want this to be an overlay layer, so select overlay for the mode, so OK, and then what we'll do, we'll go to filters, render clouds. Now what that does, that basically it renders these clouds over the top of everything, and if we just remove hiding the text shadow, hiding the plate background, and hiding the actual background, and then what we do is go to layer 1, select load selection, layer 1 transparency, go to layer 3, select transparency and add it together. Then we will do the inverse of those, go back to layer 4 where our clouds are, and delete those, because we only want the clouds affecting, it just gives bits of shade onto the metal, give a little variation. As you can see, the corner of the N here on the S, things like that. And if we go to brightness contrast controls, you could do this via curves as well on your adjustments, curves, and you can just tweak around with the clouds, and if you make shapes like this, it just gives you some more extreme variation to the shading on there. And do that, that's okay. So that's all done now. We'll bring back in our layers and bring back in our background layer, and there you have it. Nameplate done. You flatten the layer down, and obviously then via RS bin tools or whichever software you use, import your DDS format and convert the texture ready for placement on your decal object.